Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series. As we continue through the week, I want to thank all of you again for continuing to join, download, and share the word. We appreciate that very much. 7 years now, our focus has not changed. It's been the same. It's we want to provide you with education and information as much as we can by not only providing great guests like we have today, I'll introduce in just a minute, but content, information, really to help you, help you to be a more wise consumer in and around your real estate. That's really our main objective. Before we get started, just a reminder, if I could help you in the way of any purchase financing, refinancing, maybe you just need to find out an idea how much you could qualify for, I'd be happy to help you with that. Also, we have a great network of professionals that we work with. If you are seeking out a real estate agent, financial planner, CPA, attorney, anything to do with real estate, we could help you along those areas. All right, a couple of ways to contact me, 408-838-9060, or you could always email joe@reradiolive.com. All right, let me invite my guest in, Mr. Jeff Hare. He's attorney at law. We're going to have a great topic today about avoiding and resolving the legal issues of disputes, I should say, of real estate. Good to have you here, Jeff.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate being back.
Good to have you back. I know this is a busy man. Let me just set right off it's always good to have Jeff in. Very knowledgeable in his field, of course, and lucky to have him here talking about ever-changing real estate. I mean, I guess what I'll do first, we have a lot of stuff to try to cover in a short period of time, Jeff, so maybe if you could give us your background for the audience, the listeners, if you could give us an idea of your background and then currently kind of what you're doing, your roles and responsibilities day to day at this point.
Okay, Joe, if it helps the listeners, I've got about 30 years background in real estate, working both the public sector and in the private sector. I'm a mediator, and I'm serving as a mediator for both the California Association of Realtors panel and the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors. And in addition to that, I am a licensed real estate broker, so I see it from the trenches as well as from the mediation panel. And I'm a member of the adjunct faculty going on 19 years at Santa Clara University. So I've been doing a lot of teaching here, and it's in my interest to help people understand things.
And Jeff's very good at it. It's amazing to me as you update us and give us all the stuff that you're involved in. I'm always amazed when I talk to you and visit with you. I don't see how you do it all.
I don't sleep.
He's the guy that doesn't sleep, and he takes very good care of people, and he cares about people first and foremost, and that's great. Well, what do you think about give us kind of an overview of the market, the trends, real estate. Then we could jump into some of the legal aspects and how people could stay out of trouble potentially, but give us kind of your overview, if you will, or what's going on in the marketplace.
Well, of course, locally we're in a rather interesting area. The Bay Area, especially around San Jose, Silicon Valley, is seeing the continued growth of the market, very low inventory, and we're also seeing houses that are going well above asking price. And all of this was going on before Google announced that it wants to now put in a massive new complex here, which is going to have an impact long before it actually ever comes to fruition, if it does. So just the rumor that Google is coming to town is going to drive up prices, and it's going to have an impact. Yeah. So we're seeing a continuing issue with buyers frantically trying to get their offers accepted, and this is where the problem comes up.
Yeah. Let me ask you this as that comes up. Have you ever seen in your lifetime, business, professional, as soon as you just said this, have you ever seen the impact that a Google or a Facebook, and I guess in today's age, right? It used to be in the yesteryears, maybe it was IBM, maybe it was Intel, but have you ever seen the hype around a company that's decided to open up an area have you ever seen this type of thing in your lifetime?
There's been small smatterings of rumors when somebody says a company's coming to town, but just to give you a size and scope thing, the Apple spaceship in Cupertino is 2.9 million square feet of space, which is huge. And, of course, anyone who's stuck in traffic on the 280 is going to know that that's a big deal. The Google proposal is 8 million square feet. So it's an order of magnitude greater than what we're seeing in Cupertino. So it is a big deal. And so nothing of that scale has come in. I've seen situations where, let's say NASA's announcing a new program and they're going to come into an area, and so the same thing does happen. I was in Southern California. That was usually the case. Most of those sputtered, but they caused an impact, and people start speculating. Yeah.
Well, the last thing I'll say on that, it's kind of funny how we've evolved and how we sit here today. We used to all be excited about, you said NASA as an example, right? The thought of space and travel and the Mars and all these different things. Now we're so intrigued and fascinated by what's the next or latest technology. The moon and space travel seems to be, let's move along.
The flying cars are actually closer than we think.
Well, the topic today, let's jump into that. So avoiding and resolving real estate legal disputes, you're really good at this. And again, before, take us through some of the things that people should be aware of as simple as we can, I guess. You mentioned before we got this show started how overbidding, people are paying much, much more. There's buyer's remorse you and I talked about. So kind of take us through some of the things someone should be aware of today in a market like this and to be careful of.
Well, one of the things, and I think we're seeing the delayed entry into the market of the millennials who are now finally, 2 years later than expected, are actually trying to enter the market, and they're feeling probably a little panicked. If they don't buy now, it's just going to be completely impossible. Plus, we have other people trying to come in and buy into markets where there's good school districts. And because they're frantic to get in before things get completely out of control, they're making the mistakes that end up, that I see in the mediation panels and, of course, in court, where buyer's remorse kicks in because they've overspent for a property only to discover a series of defects that a few minutes of time and a little inspection might have disclosed, and they could have probably fixed it. So this is the problem that is occurring, is they're going and they're rushing into it. The real estate agents representing the buyers are not doing a very thorough job of explaining the consequences of what it means. And what we're also seeing is that the sellers and the sellers' brokers are doing a pretty good job of getting out the disclosure documents that meet the requirements of the law, but the buyers aren't reading them. Right. So right now, the biggest problem I'm seeing is that buyers are rushing in, and when you've spent that much more money for a property, and for listeners that are located outside the Bay Area, it's amazing to see that when you say that the asking price is exceeded by $500,000, when the houses in your area are selling for $250,000, there's a range of disbelief that this can be happening. Right. But when you've spent that much more money for a property, only to discover that there's huge termite damage, or that there's structural defects, or plumbing problems, or zoning problems, it hits home and it makes it very, very difficult. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, you have the benefit of, you mentioned earlier in the show, understanding real estate, your broker's license, and then you have the legal background. My concern is the same, and you brought it up, and maybe elaborate on it a little bit more. I think real estate agents right now, more than ever in this area, need to be really careful, right? I mean, and clients, listen to this, and I mean it seriously. I mean, when you're getting so worked up and you want a home and your desire, there's so much, emotional desire there at times, you're going to sometimes listen to and take advice, let's face it, from people. And this is no knock against the average person, but the real estate agents don't understand the legal ramifications.
No,
right?
I think they're not getting as good a good training as they should to cope with the fast-changing world. Right. There's some recent decisions that have come down that have talked about fiduciary duty. There's going to be a couple more coming in very shortly. And since that term is not really defined, it's a slippery slope. And the rush to get that commission and get that closing, get that commission and pay your bills often overrides common sense.
Yeah. Give me some examples of, you've seen this. I'm a listener out there. I'm listening. I'm getting ready to, I'm working with an agent to put in an offer. I'm in this crazy market, Jeff. I'm thinking, my God, I'm getting outbid. So what should someone be, what maybe some red flags? Maybe that's a good, what would be red flags if you're overbidding for a home and the realtor or someone else says, hey, listen, I'll take your offer, but no inspections, no contingencies, no appraisal, no financing. What kind of rent, what are they potentially looking at if they dive into something like that?
Well, I had one recently that the buyers, I was representing the seller in this case, and the sellers had already just had a transaction fall through, and they had plans to leave town. They needed to sell, and at this point, they accepted a new offer, and were assured verbally that this buyer was going to perform, everything was going to be fine. So they made their plans for their 1 month travel out of the country. And in a classic case, they did all the checks. The buyers came in and made a zero contingency offer. In other words, there was no inspection, there was no loan contingency, and there was no appraisal. They left town, with the keys in the envelope to hand over to close escrow, and found out in short order when the plane landed in Europe for their vacation that the buyers had not even put their house on the market to sell it, and it was contingent on them selling the other house.
Oh boy!
And so this was a problem. So it really hung things up because even though there's a way to remedy the problem, everyone was frozen in time, and they couldn't obviously relist it, but they finally got around and got it off on the market. But if buyers are being advised to put in no contingency offers, are doing so at a huge risk. They lost a lot of money, and they had to pay it for the inconvenience and the damages caused to the seller. The other one I've seen is where a buyer goes in and is so excited to buy the property, they ignore all of the reports. In this case, there was a septic system, and there's a lot of these properties that are on septic systems, but the septic system had failed and was illegal, and there was just no way to remedy the problem. They continued to ignore the warnings and charged ahead, and then ended up costing them several $100,000 in damages.
Wow. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Jeff Hare, attorney at law. We're talking about the avoiding and resolving real estate legal disputes. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series. We'll be back with you in just a minute.
For more information on today's program, visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com.
Hi, this is Joe Kuchera, host of Real Estate Radio Live and Bay Area Mortgage Planner. In addition to being your home financing expert, please remember you could always contact me for other trusted advisors such as realtors, financial planners, and CPAs. Please feel free to contact me at 408-838-9060. That's 408-838-9060, or email joe at reradiolive.com, or visit my website at reradiolive.com for more details.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome back in. Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series. As we continue our second segment of the show, I'm visited in studio by Jeff Hare. He's an attorney at law. Jeff's kind enough to spend some time with us today. Topic is avoiding and resolving real estate legal disputes, which, yes, they do happen. And in a market like this, watch out. We have some advice for you. Jeff does, I should say, because what's going to happen is you will see it. Anytime you're in a market like this where there's overbidding, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of people that, quite frankly, just want to get the deal closed, so to speak, Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that's not uncovered or thought about or discussed. And so I'm going to dive more deep, a little more deeper into Jeff about that. Before we jump back in with some of the examples that you're dealing with, Jeff, if someone wants your assistance or have some questions or how to contact you or to hire you, what's the best place to get a hold of you? How do they reach you?
Well, they can go to my website, jeffreyhare.com, and that's jeffreyhare.com. It's one way to reach me, and you can email me at jeff@jeffreyhare.com. Reach me that way. I try to respond to all emails that I do get. You
do, and you're really good at that. Although after I've given your information out, you're probably thinking, I'm not sure if I'm... You're never too busy, right?
If you don't crash my server, I guess I'll be okay.
Don't crash the server. Well, before we took a break in the first segment, you were giving some examples of some of the things you've dealt with legally and some of the problems. What other problems, or maybe give us some examples of some things that people really got in some unfortunate consequences with?
Well, some of the classics are the person that sees the 4-bedroom, 3-bath, property. It seems really good. One of the things to look at and ask your realtor is I want to see the previous MLS listings. Sometimes if you do, you realize, gee, this house was for sale 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and it only had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. What happened? Why did it change? And where's the garage? That's one of the biggest ones, is where the owner has converted the garage illegally. In most cases, it is illegal because you're required to have 2 covered parking spaces for almost every single family house in the valley. Another one that's kind of a tip-off is where if you have a dual agency situation, and that's been sort of redefined in a way, or clarified, and that is your agent is working for one of the big houses, okay, and the seller's agent is working for the same, large brokerage, but in 2 different offices. That is still a dual agency. And the problem that's come up now is that dual agency is perfectly legal, but you have to ask the question, who is representing you as the buyer? Who is representing you as the seller? So one of the another red flags is I should say, is where you have a dual agency situation, and make sure you have somebody who's really looking out for your interest.
Is there ever a time, to me, the common sense would tell us, Jeff, if an agent is representing both sides, the common sense would tell of us, that's probably not a good idea. But is there a time where it is a good idea, or you would say, you know what, in this case, I see why they're doing it? Is there ever situations like that?
There are, and I was in a situation where the first house I bought, I was in a dual agency, and the individual real estate broker who was handling the transaction was so knowledgeable about everything. He made sure that everything got done. So that, yes, there are times, there are exceptions to the situation, as there always will be. But again, it's a red flag, so check it out, do a double check, and make sure that you're getting the information you need.
Right. So if someone, the other thing that's come up several times, you get to be interesting to get your recommendation. You have, in a market like this, when someone really is not sure, and even they could have the most competent real estate agent around, that's really not the point. But I think the message I'd like to get across, one of the things today, is be really careful when you're taking advice from someone. And I'm not saying, I think taking advice from someone where the motivation could potentially be, let's face it, they earn their income that way. They want the transaction to close. I'm not saying that they're not thinking about but all that going on so quickly, the individual consumer really has to be careful to understand that, yes, I'm being represented by a real estate agent. I'm sure they're doing the best job they can. But if they start feeling uncomfortable with, no contingencies, no appraisal contingencies, and you and I have heard the stories, you're putting 5 and 10% down. Do you really know what could happen, right? What if that appraisal comes in $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 lower? Then what? Your deposit, all those types of things. Would you recommend or suggest that people get advice, someone like yourself, sit down with you for a couple hours and really just pick your brain, because you're a completely objective party. You're looking out for their best interest. There's no financial gain on your part. In other words, that's what you do. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Every real estate form will have somewhere on the forms, real estate agents do not give legal advice. Right. You should consult with an attorney, and if you don't, you're acting contrary to the advice of your broker. I can tell you flat out, most people do not do that because of two reasons. One is they see it as a cost that they really don't want to have to incur. 2 to 3 hours of an attorney's time is going to run you between $1,000 and $1,500 in this valley. Compared to the cost of the damages, it's very small, but that's a cost they would rather not incur. Second of all, there's a psychological tendency called confirmation bias to ignore the information that you're given if it runs contrary to what you are heading for. So I would say that even though it's really good advice to do that and will save you lots of money, sometimes people do not want to hear anything negative when they've made up their mind that they want this property in this location on that street, and they will take all the risks associated with it and ignore all the bad news. This is where the problems start, and this is where they don't end, and you end up getting into the deal that you should not have gotten into. Simply asking someone else to come in and give you a reality check, whether it's a lawyer or a licensed contractor or somebody who is a professional qualified to give you some advice on the property, can save you literally hundreds of thousands of dollars over the long term.
Right. Yeah. Is your experience that when cases do come to you or people come to you where you know there's going to be some litigation or negotiation or something, is it the majority of that because people in our industry, whether it be lending or real estate, we didn't do our job what we were supposed to do, or was it consumers kind of stepped into something they weren't sure of and all of a sudden they're panicking, or is it just a mix?
Well, it is a mix. Everybody has a job to do in the transaction. Yeah. The lenders, the title companies, the brokers, the inspectors. We've all run into the inspector who says, "I'm sorry, I only inspect the foundation and the walls, but you're going to have to hire someone to inspect the roof." Yeah. And they don't inspect pools. It's very frustrating for the typical buyer who has a difficulty assembling that team to go out there and give them the full picture and do it in a timely manner. So the frustration is also that the buyer has a statutory duty. It's called buyer beware, to read the reports, to do those reviews, and to look out for things that may cause problems to them. For example, the buyer who has a sensitivity to a certain type of environment may ignore that or not tell the others. So they can't do their job without complete information. So there's a range of issues that come up, and most of all, I think, is the buyer who's so rushed to get the deal is ignoring common sense and not doing their due diligence.
Right. Yeah. What would you say? Give us kind of your legal advice, if you will. Again, someone's listening to the podcast out there. They're getting ready. They're out there looking. They're stressed out about this market. Some of the things you talked about, some of the red flags, some of the things to be careful of. What would be your advice to, no matter what, get an inspection? No matter what, take the contingency, whether it be an appraisal or financing? Or, what if someone said, well, Jeff, I really want this house, and I'm putting 50% down anyway. It's $1 million home. I'm going to put $500,000. I'm going to finance $500,000. I guess ultimately it's up to them, but those things depend. Is there some factors in there that could be different?
Well, I think what you're trying to, if I understand correctly, what you're trying to say here is, what can the buyer do to protect themselves? Yeah, right. And I think there's two aspects. One is financially, and second of all is legally. Let me go to the first one, financially. One of the things that a lot of buyers do is, even though they're able to do an all-cash offer, and they're doing it, I still recommend that they get financing. And I say that because the lender is going to look over their shoulder and give them a reality check and saying, is this zoning correct? Does this meet the parameters of the valuations? In other words, if your lender is telling you that the value isn't sufficient to meet if the appraisal doesn't come back to meet the price, that should be a red flag to you right there that something is fishy about this property, because the lenders generally are fairly objective about how that works. So going in and making an all-cash, no contingency offer on the loan and or the appraisal is a mistake, even if they can afford to do so.
Right.
So that's one way to do it, and it doesn't cost you any more to do that, to have the lender looking over your shoulder. Going and getting some legal advice, the attorney is going to probably look at some of the zoning issues and whether the easements are there. Is that driveway really the driveway for your property?
Right.
I had that happen the other day where the driveway we were looking at for the buyer was to the adjacent property and not theirs. And yet everyone for the open house was using the driveway for across the neighbor's property to get onto it. Everyone ignored that until my client went next door and asked, whose driveway is this? And she said, it's my driveway, and it's closed after today.
Yeah. We're running out of time, but I do want to ask you, try to keep it as short as possible. One of the things that comes up a lot, we hear a lot in these transactions, Jeff, is, we're in contract. If we don't meet our contingencies, does that mean we're going to lose our deposit? What if we've said 10 days and our financing's not ready yet, or gosh, the appraisal's got some problems we didn't know about? That's always seems to be looming over the buyer's head, like, can I lose my deposit? I know contractually it says, I guess you can. How often does that take place? And in a market like this, or does it matter, the market, that whole issue?
Yeah, the deposit is really a relatively minor issue.
Okay.
Oftentimes the buyers will get the deposit back if they haven't completely signed away their rights to it. I just think be careful what you sign, read the paperwork, read it carefully, pay attention to it, and slow down. The deal of the century is going to happen every week.
Good point. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your time today. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for tuning in. Remember, for more information, you can go to reradiolive.com. Until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at reradiolive.com.